Hey friends, today I have a compilation video featuring some of the thrift flip home decor pieces I've created so far on my channel. Let's get into it. I got this bread box. It was from the Goodwill for $4.99 and it just opens up. There is a little crack on the inside of it where the bottom of it would have been. Nothing that we can't fix. So I took it out to my garage, gave it a good scuff sand, and this image on it was actually like a raised image if you rubbed your hand across it. So I had to sand that part down really well, or else you would have seen it through the paint once we painted it. So to fix that little crack, I'm just using my medium Starbond glue along with an accelerator. This is not the Starbond accelerator, but it works just the same. So I'm just going to fill in this crack, and then I dropped my camera when spraying the accelerator, so I didn't get that part, but you just spray it on and it instantly hardens. Next, I took this lightweight spackle from the Dollar Tree just to smooth out those cracks so that it wouldn't still be visible. I took some 220 grit sandpaper, sanded that down, and then using my little handy dandy tabletop vacuum, cleaned that all up. And I will link him in my description box below. So to paint this, I am using my moss colored Waverly chalk paint. I did paint the entire outside and then the lid, both the inside and the outside of the lid in this color, giving it 2 coats. I did not paint the inside because we're going to do something different there. So I found this adhesive stencil vinyl at Michael's. It was on clearance, so I picked it up. I'd wanted to try something like this. I could tell as soon as I opened this, it was going to be a mistake. Like, just look at those wrinkles. I did try to smooth them out with my little, why can't I think of that? Like that little brayer tool scraper from Cricut. And I lifted it up off of the surface and tried to smooth it back down the best I could. My machine just ate this thing up. I didn't get a clip of that, but don't buy this stuff.
The mat and it ripped off part of my backer. So I'm gonna go ahead and say this is a fail of a product, and no wonder it was on clearance.
So instead I went back to my Dollar Tree contact paper. This is what I like to use whenever I'm printing out a stencil on my Cricut because I'm just going to end up throwing it away and I don't want to use expensive vinyl. So I cut out this little paw print and then my dog's name, which is Sarge, because we are turning this little bread box into a dog toy box. So stinking cute. But I've had some people ask me to share my design space process using my Cricut. If anyone else is interested in that, let me know. I'm happy to create that for you guys. I'm not a Cricut affiliate, so I just haven't made a video dedicated to my Cricut design space yet, but I can certainly do that. Just let me know if anyone else is interested in seeing it. Using my makeup sponge, I added 2 thin layers of white chalk paint to my stencil and then used my heat tool to dry it and lifted it off. And how cute. I just love his little name at the bottom right corner of his toy box. For the paw prints, I am placing those on the inside of the lid. So I'm using this a little bit different. I'm having the lid actually be like the top of how the box opens, and you'll see that here in just a minute. So to fill the inside, I decided I wanted to use some fabric to line it with. I had this fabric left over from my bench in my living room. I'll insert a picture of that for you guys to see, but I thought it would be a perfect accent for the inside of his box. And knowing that he's going to be putting his toy, like pulling his toys out of it, I'll be putting them back in, but that he'll be pulling them out of it all the time. I wanted something that would hold up and didn't want to just put paint. So I am using some decoupaged glue. This is a terrible angle, so I didn't film too much of this part of the project, but you can get the idea. I just decoupaged, Mod Podge, whatever you want to use. I added this fabric down, cut off anything that was extra, and this I think is going to hold up really nicely with some wear and tear from a dog. So here is how it turned out, and I just think this is absolutely adorable. I had been looking for a bread box to make over for a while now, and I'm so happy I found one, but I do have a true bread box in my kitchen, so I wanted to turn it into something else.
Sarge, what's in here? What's in here? Is that your toys? Do you like it? What's in there? Yeah, get your toys. Which one are you gonna pick? Oh, one on the bottom. What'd you pick? The raccoon? You got your raccoon? Hard to film. Tug of war, huh? Yeah. It's hard to film.
He is just so handsome. Found this little votive holder at, again, the Goodwill, and the price on this one says $4.99, so I paid $2.50. We're up to about $7.50 right now. Not too bad. But I just sanded everything down, painted it again with my ivory chalk paint. I didn't think you needed to see that twice. And now I'm taking my antique Waverly wax and I am painting the inside, like, top portion of those, like, votive holder holes. So I don't worry about painting the whole thing because we are going to fill this in with something, and you'll see that here in just a minute. I love what the antique Waverly wax does over top of white paint. I think it just gives that realistic wood look. So next I'm taking this Quikrete that I got from Home Depot, and I just got a little bucket of it, mixed it together to the consistency. It said to just use 5 parts of the mixture of the cement mix with 1 part water. So I mixed that together, and then I just pushed it down into my votive holders, or little candle holders, whatever they are. And then I just used my finger and my thumb to just kind of smooth it out to get a nice flat surface. Once I had this in all of my holes, I did let it dry for several hours before moving on to the next step. I didn't let it dry completely because it wasn't going anywhere by this point. It was fine. So now I'm taking these rub-on transfers that you can find at the Dollar Tree. I could not find these for a very long time when everyone was using them. Finally, I found them, and I picked up like 7 packages because I wanted them so bad. But I just cut off all of the little pieces and I just placed them throughout my candle holder here and there wherever I thought it looked nice, and making sure to also, again, wrap around those edges for that more high-end look. So when you're using these transfers, you do want to make sure you're using something that's like pretty hard and flat, I guess, to rub them on, just to make sure you're getting everything to adhere properly. And then when you're going around the corners, you want to make sure you really rub off that flat surface first, and don't let the transfer bend over or touch like the corner or wrap around until you're ready to do that part. I learned that the hard way on a different project, not on this one, but if you kind of let it touch the surface before you're ready to really smooth it down, you're gonna kind of make it look off and not like it's like one cohesive piece. I hope that makes sense, but it like ends up like skipping a little bit and kind of just looking jaggedy and just not nice, not as nice. But that was it for this one. I just played around with it in all of the different variations of the leaves, and I think this looks so high-end and so beautiful. Something you would definitely find at like Anthropologie or Urban Outfitters. Let me know what you guys think. We are making a boho style cloche. So I found this glass piece at the Goodwill for $1.99, and you know I was picking that up. I also grabbed these little cork, what are they, like hot plate things from IKEA, like that you would set something hot on top of so it doesn't ruin your countertop. And it was the perfect size for the base of my cloche. So what I'm gonna do is take some 12mm beads, and I'm just gonna start placing them all around the outside of the cork part, where it's going to kind of form that edge or that lip around our glass piece to form the cloche. This is such an easy DIY project. I know a lot of cloches are more in that farmhouse style, but I wanted to make it a little bit more modern and fit into my home decor style. So when you're placing the beads down, I put them with the holes of the beads facing like sideways so that they were facing each other and I didn't have to worry about, filling in any holes. So once I got that all the way around, I did have to use a 10mm bead to fit in that last little space, but that'll be in the back and no one's gonna notice. Next up, I'm taking these little wood round pieces that I believe I got these from Hobby Lobby, and I'm just taking out 3 of the smaller sizes, and then I'm gonna use some greenery that I cut down off of a pick. And all we're gonna do is hot glue that greenery down to the base of these wood rounds. And that's it for this one, guys. This is so easy and it looks so modern and so beautiful styled on my bookshelf. I just love the modern simplicity of this piece and the way I styled it on my bookshelf. I have the solo wood flowers sitting right in front of it. I think that adds the perfect little detail. I do have an affiliate link for them. I will leave it in my description box. Stay tuned for a video coming very soon all about the solo wood flowers. This project, I would say, threw me for a loop. I changed my mind several times during this process, but I'm gonna start out by removing all of the stickers. There were several stickers on this box, just using my heat tool and a scraper or a putty knife. And then with my Goo Gone, I still needed to get all of that sticky residue off of these boxes before I could sand it down. That way it didn't just gunk up my sandpaper. And I wanted to sand this down because, again, it was a very shiny, smooth surface and my paint was not going to stick to it. So I'm using my Zinserbin primer here just to make sure that I get some good adhesion with the paint that I want to use. And I know I'm going super fast, but I didn't want this video to be too crazy long because, like I said, I changed my mind several times here. But I'm only going to show you the parts that I did keep in. So you can see I taped off the inside because I wanted to paint that black part of the box. I ended up painting the entire inside white, so taping off the inside really wasn't necessary. Next, I found this fabric at the Dollar Tree and I'm gonna cut it out. We're going to line both the top and bottom inside of this cigar box. So I'm gonna take my Mod Podge, put a good layer all over the inside, and then I'm going to lay my fabric down right on top of that, allowing it to kind of overlap the sides a little bit, and once it dries, I'm going to cut off that excess. I also added a layer of the Mod Podge on top of the fabric as well. Next, I wanted to add some jute twine to cover up those raw edges, so I'm just laying it down right along the seams with my hot glue. Now comes the fun part of decoupaging and adding all of the embellishments. So I found this napkin at the Dollar Tree and I'm just using a wet water paintbrush to kind of map out where I want to rip this, and then it rips really nicely right along that water line. And again, I'm taking some, this time, decoupage glue, and I laid it down, put my napkin down on top, used my finger to kind of spread it out, lay it down, but I did still get some wrinkles, which I was totally fine with. And I also take a layer of the decoupage glue on top of the napkin as well and let that dry. Once the glue is dry, I'm taking my sandpaper and we're just gonna go along the edges to rip off any of that excess napkin that is hanging off. Now I'm gonna start adding in kind of like an ombre effect. So I'm using that same green Joanna Gaines paint that I used earlier, laid down a section of the green where I wanted that to be, and then I also take just some basic white acrylic paint, start overlapping the two colors and then blending them together. And I worked back and forth doing this until I was happy with how the gradient looked. Now for some additional detail, I'm taking my ink pad. This is from Tim Holtz and it's the color Weathered Wood. And I just put it on this like letter stamp set that I have, and I started adding a few stamp sections to my box. Next, I'm taking this IOD trimmings mold and I want to add some trim around the box. So you want to make sure that you always line your mold with some cornstarch so that the air dry clay doesn't stick. So I just rolled up my clay like a little snake, laid it down into my mold, scraped off the excess, and then pulled it out of the mold, and it comes out super easy. This is the first time I've used this and I absolutely love it. So I ended up making 5 of those because 4 wasn't quite long enough. And the first time that I did this, I let the clay dry before applying it to the box and it shrunk way too much. So the second time I thought I would add it to my box and glue it down while it was still wet. I did end up with some cracks, but I just filled those in with some joint compound. Now I know this part is a little bit out of frame, but you have seen me do raised stencils several times on my channel. I will link a video for you to watch if you don't know how to do that. Next, I'm taking these pop-up stickers from the Dollar Tree, painting them with my ivory colored chalk paint because I wanted something to kind of go between my trimming mold and then the box, because there was kind of a slight gap there, and I thought this kind of finished it off really nicely. And I did add some of that raised stencil to the top of my box as well, which you can see here. Now I'm taking my antique Waverly wax and I just want to start distressing this box up a bit because I do want it to look aged and like it's been around for quite a while. And this is where I think I might have gone too far with it. I don't know. You guys need to tell me what you think. I was having a lot of fun with this process. Like I said, I changed my mind several times, but let me know what you think of the outcome and what you would have done with this box. Found these wood rounds at the City Mission thrift store. They said $3.49, but when I got up to the register to pay, they were actually half off. I wish I had picked up all 4, but I only grabbed 2. Anyways, I took these home and I did sand it down. I did not record that part, but now I'm going to paint them with this color sample that I got from Home Depot. It was one of the Oops paints, I guess. It was like 50 cents. And I thought it was a beautiful shade of blue. So I'm just covering my whole wood round in this color. While my paint is drying, we're gonna head out to the garage, and I found this little railing with spindles on the side of the road, and I thought it would be perfect for some riser legs. So I pulled the little spindles off. I pulled 4 of them off, and I'm gonna start cutting them down like where it naturally would make sense. So you can see where I'm pointing to there. I'm just gonna put my miter saw where that little indent is, and I'm going to cut 4 of the legs down. I took them inside to give them a coat of white paint and then realized they were way too tall to be riser legs. So I do end up cutting these down a little bit more. I don't show that part, but you'll see them shorter here in just a minute. So taking my ruler, I wanted to make sure everything was spaced out evenly. I only wanted 3 legs on this piece. So once I had them where I wanted, I drew a circle with my pencil around to mark the spots, added some wood glue, put my little legs back on, and then I did clamp them down. I probably should have done one at a time because they were slipping and sliding all over the place. So I spared you from watching that mess. But the next day, once they were dry, once the wood glue was dry, I came in with my macrame cord and just hot glued it right down into that indent there. And I thought we were going to stop here, but after I kept looking at it, I thought it looked a little too nautical, which is just not my taste. I hate it. So back to the drawing board, I grabbed my heat gun, removed that macrame cord, And then I took my ink Waverly chalk paint, which is just a black color, and I painted that whole wood round. I did leave the legs in the white color that I originally painted those. Recently, I have loved using scrapbooking materials on my DIY projects. So I found this adhesive stencil. It's kind of like a fence looking, and I think it's meant for paper crafting. That's the aisle I found it in at Hobby Lobby anyways, but I thought it would look really cool on this riser. So I placed it down and then grabbed my mineral color chalk paint, and I'm just starting to smear that on top of this stencil. I've never used one of these before. It's like a screen stencil, and I thought it was really cool the way it worked. So I smudged that paint all over and then lifted it up just a little bit so that I could make sure that it was not making a mess. And to my surprise, it looked really beautiful. And it was meant to have some of those like holes looking parts in the fence there. So I grabbed my heat tool to dry the paint here before moving on to the next section. And then I just repeated this process until just the center of that round was covered. And how cool does this look? I absolutely love that look. It kind of reminds me of like fishnet stockings or something. But anyways, I took my mineral chalk paint again and just dry brushed over my legs to give them a slight distressing and tie it all together. Last, I added that macrame back to the center little indent there, and that was it for this piece. So let me know, are you into the nautical theme? I know it is very popular right now, or coastal. I am not really into that, and I've really been trying to add some color to my projects, but I just wasn't loving that piece. So what do you think of the revamp? For this project, I found this flagstone slate looking piece at one of my local thrift stores. It was $7.99, which was kind of on the pricey side, but I thought it was really unique and I could find something really cool to do with it. I also found this jacket at my local Goodwill, and again, I loved the texture and I just knew I could do something cool with it. So I picked that up as well, and I'm gonna start cutting it down to fit in the center of my slate piece. And I actually found this idea from Julie's Designs and Signs. She did something very similar recently. I will link her video in my description box, where she cut out, it was either burlap or drop cloth fabric that she used and stamped it. And I just thought it was so cool. So I wanted to do something similar with a bit more of a modern take. So now I'm going to take you guys through how I use my Cricut design space. I know several of you have been asking for a tutorial on how I use this. So I opened up my Cricut design space and I clicked on new project, and then I clicked on the image button on the left hand side, and there are tons of preloaded images that you can find on the Cricut design space. I do pay for Cricut access, so anything with that A there I do have access to and pay a monthly subscription for. But for this piece, I wanted to find some type of like greenery stem. So I just typed in the word stem, and I'm scrolling through all of the images that pop up until I find something that I like. And I really love this simple, modern looking greenery piece. So I clicked on that and then hit insert onto my project, and it's gonna take me back to my project screen here. And I apologize, for some reason the record screen was not working on my computer, so I had to literally film with my phone, but you still get the idea. Next, I'm clicking on the shapes and I want to bring in a square. We're gonna change the size of this, so I unlock it down in that left-hand corner, and then I'm gonna change the width and the height to be the size of my black fabric piece that we cut out, so that I know how big I want this Cricut cutout to be and where it's going to sit on my fabric piece. Then I'm just bringing my image to the front. I just right clicked on it and hit bring to front so that it would be on top of my square here. And I'm going to enlarge it until I am happy with the way this looks and the way that it is going to sit on my fabric. Once I'm happy with the size of my greenery fern here, I'm just going to delete that square background. We don't actually want to print out that part of this image, only the greenery itself. And then I'm going to click up on the right hand side there where it says Make It. Now it's going to bring us to this screen telling us how many mats this is separated into. This was a layered image, so it is separated onto 2 different mats with 2 different cuts. I was okay with that, and it tells me I need a 12 by 12 inch mat to cut out this piece. So I'm satisfied with that, and I click continue, and it's going to connect to my Cricut machine through the Bluetooth, and it's going to set my base material. So I have mine currently set at vinyl on. I have the Cricut Explore Air 2, which if you need to change the setting, you turn the knob on the machine itself. But mine is set to vinyl, so we are good to go. Now we go over to the Cricut. You can see the flashing arrows. It is telling me to feed my mat into my Cricut machine, and I hit the arrow to feed my mat. Now it's going to light up the little C button. We are going to press that, and that is going to cut out our vinyl. Now, if you have been following me for a while, you know that I love to use Dollar Tree contact paper anytime I am cutting out a stencil. I don't like to waste vinyl. I feel like vinyl is too expensive for that. But if you have stencil vinyl or you prefer to cut out actual vinyl when creating a stencil, by all means, do what makes you happy. When your cut is complete, you will see that arrow again flashing for you. You're going to press it. It is going to unload your mat, and then you can take it out of the machine and start weeding. This is such a satisfying part to me. I know other people love watching weeding or weeding themselves, and there are others who absolutely hate it and dread this process, but I actually think it is quite soothing and relaxing. Once I have my stencil out, again, I like to use cheap contact paper, clear contact paper as my transfer tape, and I'm just going to lay it down. I use actually the Target brand clear contact paper as my transfer tape, and then I start removing the backing, and this sometimes doesn't want to come up all the way. I just go slowly, push it back down, and then roll it to remove the backing of my contact paper. Once I have that removed, I am going to place it down on my fabric where I want this stencil to go, remove that clear contact paper, and then we are going to start adding the paint to our stencil. So since this was a layered image, it cut out the full greenery piece as one large section, and then there is a smaller section that kind of layers on top of it. So I wanted the bottom layer that was this full piece of greenery to be in the gray mineral color. And once I'm done stamping that, you'll see in a second here I have to add on that second layer, and then we're going to add the color there. And I do use my heat tool to dry my paint in between. I added 2 layers or 2 coats of my paint, removed the vinyl or the contact paper, and then moved on to my second layer. You can see me struggling here. It was really sticky, this contact paper. Normally I like de-stick it a little bit, stick it to my shirt, but I didn't do that this time, and it was really sticking to this fabric and did not want to come off. So now I need to add that second layer, and I'm just going to line it up as best as I can right over top of that first section, and I was okay if it kind of showed the gray underneath of it a little bit. I thought it would give a really cool like shadow effect almost. And then I'm taking my ivory colored chalk paint and stamping this one. Again, I gave it 2 coats of paint and dried it with my heat gun in between. Once my stencil was all finished, I'm going to take my Mod Podge and add this fabric to the slate. Now I think I should have used a spray adhesive here instead of the Mod Podge. I didn't like how the Mod Podge turned my fabric more shiny. Even though this is a matte Mod Podge, it still does have a slight sheen to it. So if I were doing this again, I would definitely use a spray adhesive instead of the Mod Podge. But once it was dry, I just took some 2mm macrame cord and I wanted to outline the raw edges to cover those up a little bit around the fabric. hot glued that down, and that was it for this one. I absolutely love the way this turned out. I think it is super modern and minimal and just my style. I have this wall clock that I found at the Goodwill, and I'm just going to remove the back, taking the screws out, removing the hands, and then that battery mechanism. Then I am taking this fabric fat quarter that I found at Hobby Lobby with this adorable sunflower print on it. I'm going to open it up and then just cut out a square that's big enough to cover the front of that clock face. Then using my Cricut spatula, which I am still not sure what this thing is actually meant to be used for, but I am using it to remove this paper clock face from the cardboard. That way we have a nice clean surface to adhere our fabric to. And I'm taking my decoupage glue here, putting a nice layer down on top of the cardboard, adding my fabric, smoothing out all of the wrinkles, and then we are going to add another layer of the decoupage glue on top. And I do take the glue a little bit past the cardboard and the fabric so that once it dries, it becomes a little stiffer and easier to cut off the excess with your X-Acto knife. Next, we are moving on to the wooden part of the clock frame, and I'm going to take my Rust-Oleum chalk paint in linen white, and I gave this 3 coats of paint to make sure it was nice and covered and none of that wood was going to be peeking through. Once that dried, I'm taking a 220 grit sandpaper and I'm lightly distressing all of the edges, all of those like corners where there's a little detail at. I don't like heavy distressing, but feel free to distress a piece to whatever makes you happy. But I didn't really like how light the distressing looked and that wood tone that was peeking through underneath. So I took my black Sharpie, went over all of those distressing lines, and then sanded that down a little bit as well to lighten it up and make it all look cohesive. Next, I forgot to hit record, but I just took some vinyl, cut out some numbers on my Cricut machine, and taking this Rust-Oleum metallic spray paint in the color rose gold, I spray painted both my vinyl cutout numbers and the clock hands. I wanted them to both match, but I didn't have a like rose gold colored vinyl, and I wasn't really sure if spray painting the vinyl would work, but it actually worked out perfectly. Next, I'm going to add all of my numbers around the outside of the clock face this time rather than on the inside, which is how it was when I bought it. And I am using my Cricut weeding tool here to just kind of go over the outsides, like outline the numbers before peeling them off of the vinyl backing. That way I don't peel up any of that excess spray paint with it. And I mostly eyeballed it here. I used my L roller to make sure my 6 and my 12 were pretty lined up as best as I could get them. And then for the rest of the numbers, I just eyeballed it and spaced them out as evenly as I could. Once I had all of my numbers attached to the wooden frame, I'm taking my polyacrylic. I thought I grabbed matte here, but it actually looks a little shiny, so I may have grabbed my satin by accident, but I just want to make sure that I seal in all of that vinyl and it's not going anywhere. Next, we can add everything back together. So I'm taking my little watch hands, putting them back onto the fabric front, screwing the back onto the frame, and I thought we were done here, guys, but as usual, something goes wrong. I made a mistake when I put the numbers on. I didn't pay attention to where this was going to hang up on the wall. So
here's my hanger right here, which if we hung it up would be totally sideways. So I already sealed this. I'm not taking the numbers off, and I can't, even if I change the direction of this and put it up here, it's still like off. Like it would be like this. Like the 1 would be more up top than the 12. So totally didn't pay attention to that. This is actually the bottom too. So I did it totally upside down. Like this is where the top should be, right here. But it is what it is. It's fine. So we just had to come up with a creative solution for hanging this on the wall. So I have this, this is Dollar Tree leather ribbon, and I just had glued 2 pieces together. I had this sitting around for a while. I was going to use it on something else, but I think I'm going to just use it on this so we can then hang up our clock facing the right direction. I added on that leather ribbon with my hot glue gun, and that was it for this project. I absolutely love the way it turned out. I was a little upset by having to add that leather strap at first, but the more I look at it, I think it has that vintage, old school pocket watch vibe, and I absolutely love it.
I have this lamp that I found at the Goodwill. It was $9.99, a little more than I would typically like to spend on something from the Goodwill, but I really love the modern shape of it. So I'm just taking that same antique bronze spray paint from Rust-Oleum, and I gave the base of this 3 coats. So now for this decoupage part, we are going to use some napkins. I actually found these at the Dollar Tree. Aren't they absolutely beautiful for something from the Dollar Tree? And I just started ripping them up and only pulling off the like leaf part. So I did a few different methods on this lamp. On the shade of it, I did where you do the wet decoupage, where you put the decoupage down, put your napkin on top, then put another layer of the decoupage. I tried a few different ways of smoothing out the wrinkles. To be honest, I didn't really care for any of them. I tried using just the paintbrush. I tried the sprayer. I tried my fingers. I really wasn't happy with any of it. I was getting a ton of wrinkles. So then I moved on to doing the same iron-on method that I did in the beginning, and I think that gave me the best results. This piece definitely has a lot of flaws and a lot of wrinkles, but I think in the end it still turned out really beautiful. Once I got all of my napkin parts on, again, I'm just taking some sandpaper to remove any of that excess napkin that I don't need on the lampshade. And then adding some of this nautical rope from the Dollar Tree, I just untwisted it so I had 3 thinner strands, and I did wrap this around the top part of my lampshade, and I gave this 3 separate strands. One was kind of more on the inside, one right on the edge, and then one right underneath, so that it gave it a nice finished look on top. Then I added some 20mm beads all across the bottom, and that was it for this piece. I did make sure that the holes of my beads were facing each other, and here is how it turned out. You can still see the seams where all of my napkins met, but overall I am happy with the way this turned out. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Of course, I was a hot mess for parts of this video, and just like Brandy's channel suggests, I showed you the true struggle, and here's another one. I broke the light bulb as I was putting it into this lamp. I have this vase I also found at the Goodwill for $4.99. It is huge and it is very heavy. So after I got it home and started taking the stickers off, I realized there was another one on the bottom, the original sticker. It was from Kohl's and originally $40. So I definitely got a good deal on this. I'm going to start out by cleaning this piece with my crud cutter. I don't always show it, but just know that I do clean my pieces when I bring them home from the thrift store to get off any of that disgusting bacteria, grossness, whatever is all over this piece. Once I had it all clean, I'm taking my Rust-Oleum chalk paint in linen white, and I'm going to start painting this, and I'm painting in all different directions. I want this to be very messy. So I want to give it like a slight texture, but I don't want to do like the whole baking soda or adding anything to the paint. I'm just going to give it a very slight texture by going in all different directions, giving it 3 separate layers of white paint. I might have given it 4. After I added my layers of white paint, then I took a sponge that I just got in a pack from the clearance section at Michael's, cut it up into some smaller pieces, and I'm going to start dabbing on some various tones of brown. So this first shade that I'm starting with is called Classic Caramel, however you want to pronounce it, by Apple Barrel. And one of the mistakes that I made here was using the dry sponge. So I do get smarter here in a little bit, but not quite yet. So this next color that I'm taking is Territorial Beige by Apple Barrel, and I'm just going to start layering and trying to blend the 2 colors together. Since I have the dry sponge though, it's not working as well as I had hoped. So once I realize I need to wet the sponge, I do end up going back over all of my colors and it blends a lot better. So learn from my mistakes and use a wet sponge to start with. So the third color that I'm taking is called Coffee Bean, and this one is from Folk Art. So this is just a little bit of a deeper brown. So I'm going for a gradient effect here on my piece. Once I have all of those colors laid down, I do just take a tiny bit of black to richen up the very bottom of this, because you can kind of see like I have the colors not only like going in a gradient, but they're kind of like thicker and thinner in some areas as well. So here's where I got smart and wet my sponges, and then I did go back over all of my colors, adding them a little bit more and blending them together with my wet sponge, and that just made it look a lot more like a gradient effect. So you can see that here, how much better it looks. Once I got to the top, I wanted it to have more of a seamless transition instead of like that stippling look. So I just added some more of my white paint and then a dry brush, and I just kept going back and forth until I made it look a little bit more effortless. And that was it for this piece. I really love this grouping that I put together inside of my entryway. I think the mirror behind it just really elevates this table and makes it look a little more high end, and like I bought all of these pieces from the store. 2 of these I made. Everything was thrifted other than the mirror that actually was part of my bathroom vanity that I didn't want in the bathroom. I found this little like envelope looking planter, again from Goodwill, $4.99. We paid $2.50 for it. So I guess we're up to $7.58. Oh, we're at $10. I guess I'm just realizing now that I went over the $10 limit by just a little bit, because I do have one more project. But sorry guys, I just realized that. Anyways, now I'm taking some sandpaper and just giving this a nice scuff sand. I did also clean it really well with my crud cutter, inside and out, and threw away that Spanish moss that was in it. So I am going to show you a little bit of painting here because I want to walk you through my process. I changed my mind on what I initially was going to do. So first I'm taking my mineral chalk paint by Waverly and I'm painting the entire surface. So what I want to do is I want that detail to stand out. And I really was into like that blue color scheme that's going on at the moment, like the deep navy. I didn't really get this to be like that deep navy that I had wanted, but I still like the blue color, and I painted the whole thing blue over top of my gray because I want the gray to be what comes through in the details. So I was really onto the blue trend, and then I realized I want to put some like greenery in here or some florals. I really wanted greenery. And I was thinking, I don't know if this greenery is going to look good with the blue. So I ended up changing my mind. I sat on it for a few days before actually like deciding what I wanted to do with it. But in the end, I did change my mind. I think this still would have been really beautiful in the blue and gray, but it also just didn't really match my home either. So I'm really happy with the direction I ended up going. But next I took just a wet cloth and I did some wet distressing to bring out that gray underneath of the blue paint. And I thought I would have more control with the wet distressing rather than sandpaper. I actually think that this sandpaper gives a little bit more control than the rag does. And the rag also takes a little bit away from the blue paint that is around the detailing, because the water is just like kind of rubbing off that blue. So here's how it was looking. And again, this is beautiful, but it just wasn't going, I wasn't loving it. It wasn't matching my home. It wasn't matching my aesthetic. So instead I took my Moss by Waverly, which is this green color, and I put that down next. Once I had that down, I took Rust-Oleum, and I have to give a shout out to my girl Brandy from the DIY Struggle. She did a like chalk paint comparison video a little while back. I will link that in my description box below. But I really wanted to try this out after watching her video because she says how smooth this Rust-Oleum paint is. And let me tell you, if you haven't used this, it is like butter compared to Waverly. Like Waverly has that chalky texture. Rust-Oleum does not. It is so smooth and amazing. So I am so happy that I bought this. But I'm just using the linen white color over top of my moss green. So this time I decided to try out the sandpaper instead of the wet distressing. And yes, this worked out much better. I did have more control over where I wanted to bring out those details. And I was able to like give some spots like more heavy distressing, some spots a little less distressing, where when I did the wet distress, it really did like go down like even to the bare surface. And I just had a lot less control over how I wanted the final result to look. So last thing I need to do is add in my florals, and I did end up taking the handle off of the top. I was debating that throughout this entire process, if I was going to keep it painted, what I was going to do, but I did take it off. So now I'm just taking some plastic bags and filling up the inside so that we have some height for our florals. And then I'm taking some lamb's ear that I got from Walmart, placing this all around, and I gave it some varying height. So like the back was taller than the front, and I'm going to do that with all of the florals that I put in this arrangement. Next, I'm going to take these little white flowers that I got from Dollar General, and I just love how they also had that like, I don't know what it is on there, but it's like that like velvety feel to the greenery part, so it matched with the lamb's ear look. I hope that makes sense. And then the last little bit I'm going to add is some lavender pieces. And again, they have that like velvety feel. I don't even know what you call that, but it's just like a type of texture or something that's on it. But it all had that nice cohesive look. And the last little detail we are going to add is some jute twine. So I just hot glued it to the back, wrapped it around about 3 times. And of course, we need to have the jute twine. Whenever you don't know what else to do to a project, add on some jute twine and you're good. So I just hot glued that down in the back to hold it in place, and then I just added in a little jute twine bow, and that was it. I am so happy that I took a couple of days to think about this project and what I really wanted it to look like, and I didn't just settle for the blue and the gray look because it just really wasn't going to go with my home. But you'll have to let me know, what do you think? Which version would you have preferred? Are you into the blues this year that are so popular? Greens are popular too, so this still goes well with the trends of the year. I don't show it, but I do, of course, burn my jute twine to get all of those little fuzzies off. But here's a look at how this one turned out. I'm taking some ivory chalk paint and I'm painting all of the roses with this. I do water it down because I want it to be more of a white wash and not cover up all of that beautiful texture and color that these pieces originally were. Next, I'm taking my mineral color on a small detailed paintbrush because I want to give this a little bit more dimension. I thought with just that whitewash on it, it was looking a little bit flat. So I took the paint and I put it in all of the little creases and the grooves of the rose petals, and it's a very subtle difference. I'll show you here in a second, but I like the way this looked. So the one on the right has that added detail.
So I got this Joanna Gaines Magnolia Home paint sample from Habitat for Humanity when I was there in Virginia. First of all, I open it and look at the top. It is rust, all rusted, brand new sample. And then like, look at that. Like it's just, I mean, I'm sure it just needs mixed up, but like, doesn't that just look gross? I don't know. I don't know about this paint, you guys. Have you ever used this? I haven't, but I'm about to find out if it's any good. I bought 2 cans of this color because I thought it was so pretty. Olive Grove. But let's mix it up and see.
Once the paint was mixed up, it was totally fine. I don't know why I was being dramatic there. I think I was a little thrown off when I saw that rust when I opened a brand new can of paint, but I'm just painting all of the leaves in this color, and it is a really beautiful green color. This one I did not end up watering down that paint mixture. I just left it solid. And then I'm taking a baby wipe and I'm gonna start going over all of the edges to bring back some more of that original clay look underneath. Now we're gonna move on to attaching them. So I have this mirror that I got from the Target dollar spot. It was $5. It's a pretty large mirror, and I'm going to start placing these around the edges of this mirror, and it's only gonna go on like one part of the mirror. And I know filming mirrors is just so attractive when you get to see me just staring at myself while working on this project and eating some popcorn late on a Friday night. But once I had my placement, I just took some E6000 and I started gluing all of these down, and I let that sit overnight to dry. Next, I want to add in some more detail to this. So I'm taking this gold leaf that I got on Amazon. I will link it down below for you, along with this adhesive size, which is what you use for gold leaf. Also got that on Amazon. I will link it below, but you want to apply your size only where you want the gold leaf to go, and that is the only place it's going to stick. And then you want to let the adhesive size set up for about 30 minutes before you apply your gold leaf on top. After the 30 minutes and my adhesive size was ready to go, it's going to be tacky to the touch, so I just grabbed some of my gold leaf flakes and started placing them all around my florals and the greenery wherever I had added that adhesive. And it's kind of hard to tell here because it does go on like a milky white and then turns clear. So I had to keep feeling around on my flowers to feel where that glue was or the adhesive was. But after you add all of your gold leaf, you just want to take a soft cloth, microfiber cloth is what I'm using here, or a lint-free rag, and you're just going to start rubbing that gold leaf away, and it is only going to stay and stick where that adhesive was. I also took a paintbrush after that and just got up any other loose pieces. Next, I'm taking some 20mm beads, put them onto a skewer stick with painter's tape so that they wouldn't roll around on me, and I'm taking my fawn colored paint to paint these. I do end up watering down this paint a little bit as well so that the wood would show through, and you can see that here.
So the last thing I need to do is attach my bead hanger to the back of this mirror, and I really struggled trying to figure out how to make this work. So I hot glued that one piece down, and then whoop, it just pops right off. It literally did nothing. So I was pretty stumped on this for a while. I ended up getting frustrated and doing it off camera. But essentially what I did was took my E6000, put it down underneath of that wire, bent the wire over so that it would be, surrounded by the E6000 glue. And then I took some masking tape and taped it down to hold it in place. And I did leave that masking tape there so that it is in like extra secure, hopefully secure hold for this piece. And that was all I did for this one. Hung it up on my wall outside of my bathroom. And I also added on some command picture hanging strips just to make sure that it's just not held on by this bead hanger and it has a little extra security. But this is how it turned out. I absolutely love this piece. Let me know in the comments, what would you have done with these clay roses? I would love to know some other ideas. I'm recreating these restoration hardware olive jars. This is more of an inspired by than a true dupe, but close enough. I know this portion is completely out of focus, which I didn't realize until editing, so bear with me. It is only a very small portion of this project. I found these two vases at the Goodwill. They were $3.99 each, and they were the perfect texture to recreate this project. So I started out by painting both of them with my ivory colored chalk paint, and then I am going to create the baking soda mixture using hazelnut and then my baking soda. I have tried this method a few times now, and I'm really not a fan of it. I much prefer to use either joint compound or spackling as a texture additive rather than the baking soda. But I gave it one more shot. So I did just start by stippling this color all around my jar using a chippy brush, and I started going down maybe like 3 rows and just kind of gradually fading it. Then I started taking my ivory color again and going back and forth with both that hazelnut mixture and the ivory. I just started creating a gradient so that it was starting to get lighter and lighter as I went down the vase. I know you can see a gray color off to the side there. I don't mention it because I didn't end up using that color at all. All I used was the hazelnut baking soda mixture and then the ivory. And I'm doing the same thing on the top and the bottom of both of these vases, just gradually fading it and making it look like a gradient. This is the same process we have used all throughout this video of just going back and forth and playing around with your colors back and forth until you are happy with the result. And last for this project, I took a piece of my sponge in that hazelnut color, and then I just started dabbing it all over, mostly on the high points and then also in some random spots here and there. And that was all I did for this one. So here's a look at mine, $7 compared to the member version of $296 for the small olive jar from Restoration Hardware. If you are not a member, you are paying over $300, almost $400. So let me know what you think of this inspired by piece.
I'm taking this shadow box that I found from the Goodwill. It was $2.99, and let me tell you guys, I'm a little disappointed. My Goodwill has changed their pricing structure, and everything is a little bit more expensive now. Let me know if you've noticed the same thing in your area. But what I'm going to do first is take the back off of this, unscrew everything. I don't want that glass piece that came in this, so I'm just removing that, and I'm going to keep that cardboard backing. Next, I'm going to paint my frame using my ivory chalk paint, and I did end up giving this 3 coats to really cover up that burgundy colored frame. To cover up those florals on the backing, I am taking this Crafters Square cardstock. It is white and it does have a little texture to it. And then using my Jot Dollar Tree brand glue stick, I'm going to adhere the cardstock paper down. I love using this glue stick method for something like this instead of Mod Podge, where I just simply need this to be a nice plain background. Once I have my cardstock attached to my cardboard, and I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and cut off the excess. And I'm just going to repeat that process for the second half, and don't worry about that seam, you're not even going to see it. Next, I'm taking some Jenga blocks along with my Star Bond super glue, and I am attaching 1 in each of the corners, and then I also add 4 into the center area of the inside part of my shadow box because I want that backing to sit up a little bit higher and further away from the front than it originally was. And I also use my Star Bond super glue to attach that cardboard piece to the Jenga blocks themselves, and I did not end up screwing this piece back in. Now comes the fun part. I am just taking various sizes and flower types, and I'm going to start arranging them throughout this shadow box. I really love these skinned florals and just like the added dimension that they gave to this piece. Most of what I used here were from the mini assortment, and then I did add in just a few of the medium sizes from the bag that I had purchased on my own because I wanted there to be a nice difference in sizes as well as the flower types. Once I was happy with the arrangement, I started taking my hot glue gun and just picking up a small section of the flowers, gluing those down in place, and then moving on to the next section so that I wouldn't forget where I had everything laid out. Once everything was glued down in place, I am taking the sawtooth hangers that came on the original piece and I'm adding some E6000 to the ends of them so that I can make sure the hanger is nice and secure in place and it will not just pop right out. And here's how this one turned out. I absolutely love the neutralness of this piece. If you've been watching me for a while, you know I love my neutral home decor. The way I added the sawtooth hangers on the back, you could hang this piece vertically like I have here, or you could also hang it horizontal. I really love the vertical look of it, and this could fit in any small space. It will be available on my website, which is linked in my description box below. I have this little hexagon stool that I found at the Goodwill, and it is pretty dirty, pretty beat up, and it's not beat up, but it's pretty disgusting. The tag says $5.99. I paid $3 for it. I got it on a 50% off day. So the first thing I need to do is spray it down with my crud cutter, clean it really well because it was pretty dirty. Then I'm going to take it out into my garage and I'm going to use my palm sander to sand it down. Now, it looks like I'm going all the way down to bare wood. I don't do that around the whole thing, but there wasn't a whole lot to this piece. Like it seemed like it might have had like a thin layer, maybe stain. It was probably just like a protective sealer. So I just gave it a nice scuff sand.
So while I was sanding, I realized the top was just held on with these screws. So I just took it off so that I could get all the way around top, bottom, and then I noticed this little guy's missing. And I don't know if I did that or if it was like that. I thought I checked the whole piece before I bought it, but possibly I missed something. So I think I'm just gonna like pry all of these off. I can't really do it with one hand, but I think I'm just gonna take them all off and maybe like fill in the holes. So we'll see about that. Still thinking on that little part. But then I also realized when the top was on, it was kind of wobbly. So these pieces, you can see there, they're just like kind of sitting together. So I am gonna take some wood glue, glue these down nice and secure so it doesn't wobble like that anymore.
So once I added in all of my wood filler, I was letting that dry and brought the top piece in to paint it with my Ivory color by Waverly. And I did paint the top and bottom of this piece with 2 coats. After my wood filler was dry, I just sanded that down to be flat, and you can see now that the top is nice and not wobbly anymore. You can't really see that, but it's not wobbly anymore. And I decided to paint this with a deep navy blue. Now I mixed up this color. I used Apple Barrel True Navy and then ink, which is black by Waverly, because I wanted to be a very deep navy blue. And I love the color that this turned out. Blue is really popular in home decor this year, so I wanted to start making a few pieces with this color. I also started on the bottom of my stool and then worked my way to the top of it. Next, I'm taking these wall art stickers that I found at the dollar spot from Target. They were $5, I guess the bullseye spot, whatever you want to call it. They were $5. And I'm just gonna peel these little like terrazzo pieces off and place them all over my stool. So I took the largest pieces first, placed those where I wanted, and then I filled in with like the more medium and smaller pieces throughout. And I did make sure to like wrap some pieces around the corners and get them on the sides, but I did not go under the stool. I didn't really think that part was necessary. But these are basically just really, really thin little stickers. And they're not navy. The dark ones are more black, but I thought because they were so like sheer almost, you really couldn't tell the difference between the black and the navy. So once I had everything placed where I wanted, I'm just taking some polyacrylic and I'm going to seal everything in. I like using polyacrylic because it's water-based, and using a white or light paint, it is not going to turn yellow over time. After the poly dried, I did go over it with a little bit of sandpaper, and this was a 220. I went very lightly, but you can kind of see it did like leave some little spots in my terrazzo looking stickers, and I was okay with it on the edges because I felt like it gave it a more like realistic look. But there are a few little spots that kind of threw it off, but that's okay. I still think this looks amazing. So now I just need to attach the bottom of my stool to the top of it, and it was really hard to fit my screw gun in there, but it worked out. And the last little detail I'm going to add is some little furniture tacks. So I just marked where I wanted to place those, held them on with my little pliers here, and then hammered them down. So I did pull them down a little bit from where those original dowels were, and I didn't put them on the bottom. I only put them on the top. But I thought this was a nice finishing detail to the piece, and they're like a bronze color. But that's it for this project. Let me know what you think. I think this looks so on trend and so cute for a thrift store find. Oh, I forgot to mention, I also did seal in the navy blue color with a just clear chalk paint wax. So I found this farmhouse metal tray at the Goodwill. It was $2.99. And I am going to strip this white paint and faux enamelware look off using my citrus strip. This thing was a pain to get all of this paint off. There was really only like one layer of white paint and then some of that black around the edges to make it look like that enamelware. But this stuff did not want to come off of that metal. I wish I knew what kind of paint they had used because I have never gotten paint to stick to metal the way this paint was sticking. I think I spent half of a Saturday stripping this paint off, going back and forth with the citrus strip and then scraping it at least 4 to 5 times, if not more. But once I finally got it off, I'm taking my Rust-Oleum spray paint in Heirloom White and I gave it 2 coats. No, I think I gave it 3 coats because it was still peeking through a little bit. Next, I'm taking this flat reed that I got from Amazon, and I can link that in my description box below. But I'm going to start cutting down long, narrow, well, of course they're narrow, long strips to fit across the center of this metal tray. I cut down about 7 strips of this flat reed, and I started out gluing them down in the middle and then worked my way out because I knew that there was going to be like one piece that needed cut, but I would rather have like 2 pieces on either end needing cut than just one. I thought it might have looked a little odd. So taking my E6000, that is the adhesive I wanted to use here to make sure there was a nice secure bond. And then I just placed my reed strips down, working my way again from the center out. Once I had all of my strips down, I took my X-Acto knife to cut the pieces that were a little too wide on either end, and this stuff cuts down super, super easy. Then I just stuck some full paint bottles and some rocks from my gravel driveway on top of it overnight to dry. So I wanted to make this like a tiny little riser, and I grabbed these little cube pieces that you can find at the Dollar Tree as my feet, and I just lined them up all the way across the bottom. To adhere them to the metal, I'm using this Starbond glue again, and at first I had put the glue on the wood piece, attached it to the metal, and it literally just popped right off. It didn't stick, it didn't do anything. So then I thought, well, maybe I'll add a dab of hot glue, but I didn't want to add the hot glue. So instead I grabbed the accelerator, I put the glue on the metal, sprayed the accelerator on my wood piece, then stuck it down, and that worked out perfectly. So I just repeated that all the way around, and I did not end up adding those blocks across the short end of my tray, only the 2 long sides. To cover up the raw edges of the reed, I just took this black sisal rope that I've got from Hobby Lobby in my stash, hot glued that down around the edges, and that was it for this one. I ended up styling it a few different ways so you could see several different options of what the possibilities are with this piece. First, I just added some little decorative display items, some candles, and some, what are those called? Beaded garlands? That's it. I stuck some candles and a little bit of greenery. I really wanted to make sure you could still see the bottom wood part of this tray, so I didn't want to throw too much on top of it. I think this is my least favorite option. Next, I just have these little clear greenery DIY projects that I did several months ago on my channel. I think this is my favorite option as it is very clean, minimal, and modern, which is just my style. But I'd love to know what you would do with this tray. I'm going to start out by just removing the back of this frame and taking out that glass piece. We're not going to use it at all. Then I'm giving the whole frame a light sanding just because this does have a really smooth surface to it. And even though I'm using chalk paint, I don't always trust that it's going to stick to the surface. So I like to sand my pieces before adding the paint. And I'm going to paint the entire frame in the color Fawn by Waverly, making sure to get into all of those little cross sections. Next, I'm taking some wire. This is just floral wire, and I'm cutting off a small little section of it and then taking these 12mm beads, and I'm gonna start stringing them all along my wire. And what we're making for this is a little beaded wreath to go on our picture frame window. Once the wreath is as big as I wanted it, I just took the two ends of the wire, twisted them together, and then folded the long ends of it inside of the beads. Now I need to decide what ribbon I want to use to hang up my wreath with. So I started eliminating them one by one until I narrowed down to just the black leather ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I cut a piece of my leather ribbon, and then I'm just hot gluing the end together, leaving some of it to wrap around the top of the picture frame. And then I just glued that down as well after I decided how low I wanted it to hang. Now I just need to embellish my wreath with some little florals. These are all from the Dollar Tree as well. I'm using this little like yellow, I was gonna say yellow greenery. Wow. Yellow florals, and then this little like grass looking one. I thought this, or like wheat maybe. I thought it was really cool looking. And then I added in a tiny little pine cone and one of those pumpkins from the scented, like, they're not, I don't know that they're potpourri. Maybe they are, but those little bags that you can find at the Dollar Tree right now. Next, I wanted to pick out one of these fall words that I found at the Dollar Tree. They say farm fresh, hello autumn, give thanks, welcome fall, blessed, and then hello fall. So I ended up picking out Hello Autumn. I wanted to see what all came in this set first because you really can't tell just by looking at it. And then I'm taking my ivory colored chalk paint, and just like I did with those white roses in our first project, I'm giving it more of a white wash because I still want to see that wood peeking through. And I did not glue this to my window in case I ever wanted to change it out. But that was it for this one. I think it is super adorable. But again, I'd love to know what you would have done with this frame. Little footstool at a local antique mall, and this thing was absolutely caked on with layers and layers of paint. I could just feel it in my hands how much paint was on this thing. So I took my citrus strip, poured it all over this to get at least some of those layers off so that I wasn't sanding and sanding for hours on end. And you can see whenever the citrus strip is ready to be peeled off, it kind of looks like it is separating there, and you can see just how many layers of paint this thing had. It was crazy. Once it was ready, I just took my plastic spatula. You don't want to use something metal because you don't want to put scratches in the surface. You want to use something plastic here, and I scraped it up. I did that probably at least 3 times to get multiple layers of that paint off, and then I went in with my sander to get the rest of the paint, and this wood was seriously stained with this green paint. It did not want to come off. So it kind of ended up ruining my initial plans for this, but we worked it out and it still looks beautiful in the end. So once I finally got it as sanded and as clean as I could, I took it inside and I'm using my black Waverly ink chalk paint, and I'm going to paint the bottom. I don't paint the top of this. I wanted to stain the top, but I do paint the bottom and the legs in my ink Waverly color. Next, I taped off the top of my stool because I didn't want any of the stain to drip down onto my freshly painted black bottom of this stool. And then I'm taking this sun bleached stain from Varathane, and you can just see how dry this wood was, and it was just absolutely soaking up this stain. And I knew you were still going to see that green color peeking through that was stained on the top of this wood anyways, but I wanted to give it a try. I gave it a couple of coats of the stain, let it dry, and realized that just wasn't gonna work out. So then I took my mineral colored chalk paint, added it into some water to water it down and give it more of a wash. And then I took that and I painted it on top of my stool, and it gave the same effect as if it were a stain. You can still see that wood grain through since I watered down that paint. For my Cricut decal on this project, I created my own design in Cricut Design Space, and unfortunately I could not get this to record or work either. So what I did was created a free printable for you guys. I will have the link to that in my description box below, but I will have that listed on my website. You can go to that and download it for free. I really wanted to create something to help give back to you guys, and I plan on doing a lot more free printables coming up in the future. Once I had this arrow design weeded out, I placed it kind of on the top portion of my stool, placed it down again with my clear contact paper from Target, and then I slowly peeled that off, and we are going to use the ink Waverly chalk paint to add the paint on to this stencil. And that was all I did for this one. Again, I love how modern and minimal this looks. You could style it in so many different ways in your home. That's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me. Don't forget to head over to my website, check out my free printable, and I'll see you in the next one.